Hi, I'm Danielle,
And I'm Megan.
and today we're going to have a little conversation about technology in the classroom. And we're going to discuss what it is and why teachers aren't using it. So
We obviously use technology in our everyday life, no matter what age we are. But I'm wondering, how is it used in schools?
when we were researching this, there was an article titled "The Impact of Teaching in Elementary Classrooms." And they had several statistics listed towards the beginning of the article, and several of them were really interesting, and so we thought it would be important to bring those up. 77% of parents accept that usage of tablets increases children's learning and creativity. Now that is something that I had to mull over a little bit, because people always complain that like if kids are on their tablets too long or whatever, it stunts, their creativity. I remember having a conversation about that even this week in class, reading. Actually, it was when I was reading or listening to the podcast, doing the homework through the Apple Slice, and they said something about 2 hours or so. If you let them sit on it for too long, then that will it will stunt their ability to come up with like ideas on their own, because they've been relying on those screens to entertain them. And so that's something that I was like, oh, okay, well, I didn't realize that number would be as big. So what do you think, Meg?
Yeah, I definitely agree. That really took me by surprise. Just from what I've heard from my own generation and from like my parents' ages, I just feel like it's more of a negative thing. As far as like they can learn more from it. I know, like we talked about in class, doctors only want kids on it for 2 hours, but I guess that's only to a certain age level. But yeah, it just took me by surprise.
And then leading into that, 72% of the iTunes top selling apps are targeted towards younger kids, so like preschoolers and early elementary. And I mean, I don't know. I think it makes sense logically, because when you go on the App Store, I personally have a Samsung, so I don't really have iTunes or any of that. But even on my like Play Store, like you get on there and it's just like you get a bombardment of games,
Right.
of like little kids like math games. And then I have done a lot of babysitting in the past, and just like usually the parents will have like these just tablets and screens filled with apps, and a lot of them can be used for good things like learning tools, and teachers will even use them in classrooms, as we'll talk about later. But the fact that the technology industry is realizing how much technology is being rooted in the early stages of someone's life is kind of crazy to me. So that statistic didn't really shock me, but I was just kind of like, I guess in the same sense, I didn't realize it was as big as it was listed here.
Right.
So thinking through that stuff, there have been several, actually not several, like I can't even give you a quality number of the amount of developments that have come up in technology in accordance to schools and the ways teachers that use them. There have been like a lot of specific advancements that these designers have come up with to try and ease the burden of teachers and help them to create dynamic learning experiences. And so there's that.
So there's some research that we've both done. We found that technology has so many different types of, it hits so many different types of like learning abilities and learning sets from all different kinds of students. So like Danielle said, there are a lot of different types. The first one that we did some research on is called screencasting. And that's when videos are made on usually a computer, and then they're broadcasted or put on the web somewhere. So a couple benefits about screencasting is that it takes less time than other forms of technology, and it's also a little bit cheaper because you don't have to put up big equipment. Most schools have at least some computer accessibility, so that's nice.
And also, don't mean to cut you off there, Meg, but they also, Google has all those apps and things that you can download. I know we had a project in a class that I took where we had to do a lecture online, and I downloaded a screencasting app right onto my laptop for free, and I was able to do that, so that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Also, teachers can create lectures, so some teachers like to do the flipped classrooms, where they make a lecture online, the students watch it at home, and then they do the work in class with the teacher. So that's another option. Another thing would be teachers could hold virtual office hours through screencasting. So you can go online and talk to your teacher in an appropriate way over online through screencasting when you're not in school.
As well, another kind of obvious thing that is prevalent in our society as far as technology goes and in the schools is the use of tablets and iPads. Tablets and iPads, I know a lot, especially like towards the end of my high school career, I know teachers were starting to realize that you can like apply for grants to get these things because tablets and iPads are pretty expensive, hundreds of dollars per thing. And so like I remember I had a family consumer science teacher that applied for a grant and got a class set of iPads that were used. So kind of going into that, they're moderately expensive. I mean, if you're only buying one or two for like your family, like a personal use kind of thing, they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking to buy a class set for like 30 plus children, like that kind of adds up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way that that's one reason why the use of them might not actually be as prevalent in classrooms because like they just kind of like the sheer quantity is a lot.
Right.
More and more schools are using them though because of the ability to apply for grants, so that's awesome. And then they can be adapted to almost any activity, whether that's you have a curriculum, maybe you create your own app because that's something you can do now. You can create apps based on whatever you want, or you can do like a project-based learning assignment where they do research on the tablet instead of sitting at a computer, which promotes community and group work. If they have one group sitting at a group of tables with an iPad and they're all kind of using it to work together. And so there's that, as well as it helps the environment. Obviously that's something that a lot of people are worried about, greenhouse
Mm-hmm.
gases and burning and things like that. So using those, you can have them type up. Microsoft Word even has an app you can type papers on these tablets and turn them in online like we do in college.
Right.
So I think that's really good for the environment too. So, and it's universal. You can link them to your, obviously like Apple products, you can link through the iCloud. I'm a Samsung user, so like I said, I don't know how this works, but
Mm-hmm.
you can link all of that through the cloud and do all that stuff, so that's cool. So what else did we find, Meg?
Let's see, I also found some stuff on student response tools. There's multiple different brands you can get of this, I'm sure. Some are online, some are like actual handheld devices, but what they are they're usually wireless and they're used by individual students, and a teacher can put a question up on the board and they can answer it through their wireless device, usually called clickers. I know some of my teachers have had us pull out our phones actually and just text in answers, and that's another really great tool that we can incorporate technology into questions that we have in the classroom. And that way it's also private too, so I know I always don't like to talk sometimes, and that's an easy way for me to voice my opinion.
Yes, ma'am. Also, a really integral part is smart boards. I know I was discussing this with my group earlier today. I know back home we use this thing called Elmos, which are similar to smart boards. They just project them on the screen. It's just not as bulky. But smart boards are kind of like an interactive whiteboard that you would use digital. You can use like these pen things to go through websites and use them to like click on different things and bring things up. And then you can also use them in they have like a paint page or something. You could like write on a blank page and do all that. But they're also really cool because you can incorporate your class into them. Like if you have a online, digital, like if you, for instance, math. I've seen these used a lot in math. You can have students come up and race, you do long division on the smartboard, and you can use them. They're relatively safe to use as well, as long as you educate your class on proper use of those. So I think that's also really awesome. And you don't have to go to a giant computer lab. I mean, there aren't no smartboard computer labs, and so I think that is really cool. You can have one central to your classroom that can be the center of instruction, and it can also be used for that. So I think that's really cool. Kind of moving into our favorite pieces. After all the research, I know personally I really enjoyed the clickers. I think I'm not a shy person at all, So I guess it wasn't really beneficial to me, but I like the idea that if you have a class of students that isn't comfortable speaking out, or there's just some stuff going on, these things can, they're personal, as well as teachers have access to that data after they use them. So if you have a clicker system and they're turning it into you and they don't even need to see their own responses, I think at the end you can compile that data and use it towards your students' portfolios, and you can track their growth just through that one simple thing, as well as the fact that they can be used in multiple different types of assessments, so for formative or summative. So I think that makes them really versatile. Even though they're kind of expensive, I think that they're really relevant. So what about you, Meg?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I think it's cool how they can be used for so many different things, even though they are good cost. They can be used for multiple things and not just one thing. But my favorite is actually not one that we talked about. It is just a classroom website. Very simple, but I think if a teacher has the ability to make this very simple, clean, and helpful, that it can be the best use of technology that I've come across in terms of classroom settings. So yeah, when a teacher does a really good job of just displaying information that parents or students may need, like homework, schedules, anything like that, that has helped me the most through my career so far.
And with that, we kind of talked about all the different types of technology that are available today for teachers and to implement in our classrooms, but we haven't touched on yet why aren't they using them adequately. And so that's kind of what we're going to go into here. There's so many amazing types of technology that are out there, but there have been barriers and limitations, maybe not necessarily in a physical sense, that have come up that have made our educators not be so apt to actually use those things. There are we split these barriers up into two different categories. There's external as well as internal. And external and internal each have their own little interior components that make them the barrier that they are. For external, they deal with simply lack of access to technology, as well as poor training on the use of these technologies. And then lastly, we have labeled support. So that also includes support in incorporating these things into curriculum, as well as support in having issues when they're running. So discussing access, this is something that hits close to home, because coming from a community that personally, like my home, I live in a broader area, upper middle class area, but I personally didn't grow up very privileged, and so it was hard for me in school when we would get assigned these like homework tasks, like you have to type up, make a Prezi or something. That's the first thing that comes to mind. And I don't have a computer, so I'd have to have my mom, who's disabled, drive me across town to a library, and it was always a lot of stress on my behalf. So access is one thing that teachers really worry about, as well as the fact that a lot of lower income schools don't have access to, don't have the ability to buy a whole brand new spanking computer lab full of iMacs or whatever the heck they're called. So I think that is something in the access department. So that's why teachers, kind of like I mentioned with the iPad thing, they'll bring in, like they'll go and find, like, do crowdfunding things, or they will ask their local PTOs if they're in a better going district, or they'll apply for grants or do whatever they have to do to try and get these technologies if they're in the right mindset to use them. As if we're going off of that, poor training, I would say that I'm, what is it called, Meg? Digital native?
Digital native.
Digital native, yeah. I would say that I'm one. I'm on the cusp of it, and so I'm able to easily use a lot. Like I can, my grandpa just bought my grandma a new tablet for Christmas, and he messaged me right away, "Help your grandma set this tablet up." And so with that, I naturally know how to do that. But some districts, especially with like veteran teachers, it's not as easy for them to just click on with these things and know exactly how to use the evolving technology that's out there. And so poor training and not being able to use those things is really hard for some educators. And so that's part of the reason why they don't want to use it, because they just don't know how. And with that, during instruction, when you're assigning a homework assignment, it's important that you are adaptable. And if you assign like I said, like for example, the Prezi thing, you have to be understanding if a student comes to you and says, "I don't have access to that." You can't. It's not fair to penalize. I don't think so. In that regard. And then the last part of the external barriers that we're going to talk about is the lack of support. And so I spent back to the whole idea of a veteran teacher. It's hard for a veteran teacher who's been teaching, say, English for 40, that's kind of a long time, 25 years or so, that has the same kind of curriculum set and that have already promoted themselves and have had a successful classroom experience, to just be like, "Oh, now there's this computer thing and I'm supposed to put it in here." Like, it's hard for them. And so a lot of districts have gone to hiring professionals to come in and help their teachers adapt their curriculums and their learning experiences to include technology. Actually, we're working on a WebQuest thing in class right now, and things like that, helping them find little bits and adapt them into their everyday. And I think that with that comes time, and I think as time goes on, it's easier for them to work through that. and also the idea of support with like tech support. I mean, IT, if your school district doesn't have a good IT department, it's gonna be hard for a teacher to maneuver these things if they get into the classroom and their laptops don't turn on and they have it connected to an HDMI cord that is broken and they can't figure it out and nobody knows how to do it, so it's really hard. But yeah, that's the external part of that. So
Yeah, those are all very valid points. Kind of goes hand in hand with the external, but internal barriers. There's two main ones. Danielle kind of touched on it already. But if a teacher is resistant to technology, there's multiple different reasons as to why that could be. Maybe just their belief or attitude towards it is negative because of an experience they've had, or they just truly don't believe that it could help their students. Whether that's right or wrong, those are some reasons why they're resistant to it. And then a big one is confidence in skills and knowledge. So like Danielle was saying, if they're not a digital native like we are, then it can be harder for them to understand, and if they don't understand something, it's harder to be confident about that, and I get that 100%. So yeah, those are just, and it makes it hard when it's the teacher that is being the barrier to further success through technology, so that's hard.
exactly, when they're resisting the further changes, it's difficult to implement those things. All in all, technology, I feel like is always going to be the elephant in the room. Elephant in the room being a large present force in our classrooms, and it's always going to be up for question whether incoming teachers are willing to incorporate and use it. And that's why I appreciated doing this research, because I thought it was nice to kind of see all the different sides and all the different things that are available, so that when I go into my own future classroom, I am able to kind of have a good handle on it. But I think as long as everyone as long as people are willing to just give it a shot and look for the support in places, even if it's not readily available, and just being being creative and having a sharp mind to the ways it can be used, I think technology can be really just an experience-changing thing. So, Meg, do you have anything else you kind of want to throw in there? Or
I really agree with all of it. Yeah, I think just being open-minded is harder said than done. Yeah, that's the word. But I just think that's super important in every aspect of life, not just technology. So
yeah. Well, thank you for giving us a listen and hanging out with us, and I hope you learned something.
Bye.